Hey there, hey there. This is Ricky for day 9 of 40 Days in the Desert, our Lenten challenge. And we're walking through Lent with Jesus and Job. So we're in the book of Job, chapter 9 today. And basically, Job is having his chance to respond now to the second of his friends to try to give him some words of wisdom, which was Bildad. We heard from him yesterday. So today we hear Job's response to Bildad. And basically, Bildad had a lot of challenging words for Job. And it wasn't what Job wanted to hear, but Job responds by saying, "Truly I know that this is true, but how can a man be just before God?" That's an interesting question. So how can we find ourselves worthy to be in the presence of God? How can we find ourselves holy enough to be in God's presence? Well, the answer is you can't. You can't find yourself worthy enough to be in God's presence. But the beautiful thing is that we don't have to be worthy. That's the way that God works is grace. Grace is this beautiful thing that means that God freely offers his life to us. And it doesn't mean that we have to be worthy. It doesn't mean that we have to earn it, because we can't earn it. And that's why Jesus died on the cross for us. He paid that price for us. And that's why through Jesus we are able to call ourselves children of God. We talked about that a couple of days ago. And because of that, we have the grace of God. So that's Jesus is what makes us worthy. It's nothing that we can do ourselves. It's nothing that we can earn. As good of as moral of a person as we try to be, that's not going to earn for us God's love. That's not going to earn for us God's grace. So I think that's part of the lesson that Job learns as he's responding to Bildad today in chapter 9. He says that, I know. He basically says, you're right. I believe all those things are telling me that I've got to trust in God and I can't let my suffering get the best of me. But how can I be worthy enough of God? How can I know that God's not going to smite me? He's not going to send me to hell because I know I'm a sinner. He acknowledges the fact that he's a sinner. And that's important too. So we've got to acknowledge the fact that we're not perfect, that we've got sins, that we've got all these areas of our lives where we need God's help. And it's only through him that we are made worthy. We're made worthy through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. We're made worthy through the grace of God. So it's an interesting way that things work. In our world, we're used to having to pay for something in order to get it. We have to ask for something in order to have it. But that's not the way that God works. God's grace is a free gift that comes from him. We don't have to do anything to be worthy of it. What we do have to do is to accept it. And that's kind of what Job has to learn today, is that he says, who am I to be worthy of God, right? Well, you're nobody. You're just another one of his creatures. But that's the beauty of God's love, is that he loves us all more than we would ever even understand. And so we've got to learn to accept the love that he has for us, accept the grace that he wants to pour out into our lives. And that's the interesting thing. God never stops pouring out his grace. His grace is always there, raining down from heaven. But we prevent ourselves from receiving that grace through our sin. So when we do sin, it does kind of put a barrier in between us and God, so that his blessings and his grace doesn't reach us. It doesn't mean that he stops pouring it out. It means that we've done something to limit the way God can act in our lives. Now that is important. So that's why when God challenges us to follow his ways, to follow his commandments, it's so that we can be sure that his grace will be continually flowing down into our lives. Because without his grace, it's impossible to live the commandments. But if we don't live the commandments, then we don't get his grace. So it's an interesting way that God works these things all out. And I guess the last thing I wanted to point out was the fact that when we look at the lives of the saints of Mother Teresa or St. Francis of Assisi, some of the more popular, famous saints, we see in their lives the way that they give themselves completely and totally to God. They trust in him completely. We've talked about trusting in God. But they come to God knowing that he knows what's best for them, that he is going to do whatever he needs to do in their lives in order for them to be the people that they need to be. In order for them to become the saints that we know them as, they've got to trust in God. They've got to, what's the word I'm thinking of? They've got to cooperate with the grace of God. And that's why they spend so much time in prayer, to cooperate with the grace of God. So that's our lesson for today. I will see you tomorrow on day 10. Have a blessed day.